What's going on, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Gridiron Uncensored. And we got the OG crew back tonight. Blake is back with us. So we're glad to have him. And of course, we're rolling on with the Big Ten previews. We've covered all of them except for three. We're hitting Maryland, Michigan State, and Michigan tonight. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes throughout the Big Ten, new teams, new coaches, new conference. Like the whole thing's freaking strange, but we're gonna give you the best that we got on these teams. And starting off with Maryland, I guess we can just go ahead and get right into it like we've been doing. Maryland, I feel like it was a little bit hard to find some stuff. It's funny, certain teams you can really see how open some of the blogs are and how much information flows out there. Maybe I just suck at searching, but Maryland, a little off. Do better on your blog game. Or Maryland fans, tell me the best ones to follow for future reference. Now, obviously, 2023 didn't go the way they wanted it to. 8-5 overall, 4-5 in conference, and obviously you play Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. That's always a tough slate. But it was when they lost to Illinois, when they lost to Northwestern. They lost a tight one to Michigan. Really, lost a huge opportunity there. So they want to see if they can get over a hump going into 2024. And you're going to Mike Loxley's sixth season. So Thule is gone. You're going to have a new quarterback. Let's talk about 2024 Maryland boys. What are you thinking about this team? They've had some movement in the portal. It's only the 84th overall, though.
Maryland's a tricky one for me because I know last year I was just like, I really think that they could do some damage. And for the most part, I was correct and we were correct. I think all of us were pretty much on the same boat that they were probably like sixth best behind Iowa, probably. And I don't necessarily hate their transfer class, but it doesn't obviously blow you away too much and have the confidence. MJ Morris might be a good pickup, but we'll kind of see how that plays out. As far as their schedule goes, I mean, it's for the most part really manageable. I don't really see too many speed bumps. I feel like a team like Maryland, with all the transitions that they're going through, it's like even the USC Oregon game, Rutgers game, Iowa. It really, you know what, from October to the end, it's a problem. I feel like for Maryland, unless they've really got their identity down pat and they're going to, stick with maybe a run first type of attitude instead of that spread stuff that they've been doing. I don't know. Brendan, what do you have for the over-under on Maryland this season?
Yeah, my bad. Over-under is 7.5.
7.5?
Yeah, they returned 51% of their production from last season.
Okay.
So, I mean, they've got some numbers coming back, and it seems Vegas likes what they can do. So,
yeah, I think that's a little high, to be honest, especially essentially expecting 8 wins. I think that they, you know what, it's possible. If they beat everyone not named USC, Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, or Penn State, that would still get them there.
Yeah,
but I honestly, with all of the changing of Big Ten right now, Maryland might be left in the dust a little bit this season.
Yeah, Blake, what do you think?
Good.
Yeah.
Everything I've been reading on Maryland is they are going to have to get the bulk of their wins on the first half of their schedule because it is a pretty easy first 6 games. And everything I'm seeing is they're going to win at least 5 of those. But the last 6, they've got a tough slate. They've got to play USC and Oregon. Obviously, that's going to be tough for them. But they are always a team that historically they always compete with everybody, and they'll give a tough game to a top team, and they're going to have to squeak some of those out if they want to meet the threshold at 8 wins. I don't see them doing it. It's hard to do that, expanding the Big Ten to begin with, but also replacing their starting quarterback. That's just a tough feat to ask out of any team, especially a team like Maryland. So
No, I agree, and that's the biggest part I think of this offseason is you've got your first quarterback battle since I think 2019.
Mhm.
And Mike Moxley, he always finds a way to get offense. They're going to lean on this defense, just like they did last year. But when it comes to quarterback, it's MJ Morris or Cameron Edge, and it seems like from spring ball and what I've been reading, and it seems like Edge had the best spring game, but again, not every spring game is going to tell you every answer. All right, I know some people lean on that way too much. There's a lot of learning, especially with the transfers nowadays, and all the offensive line that they're piecemealing it together out of the portal. So I'm curious to see how MJ Morris does through summer and then fall camp because I mean they brought him in from North Carolina State. He had flashes of talent, so I feel like they want him to be the guy. But if he's not ready, I guess Edge he's shown out pretty well, so he might be it. Uh, but it's again going to lean on this offense,
Right.
excuse me, this defense and the offensive line.
Yeah.
How do they
Yeah.
piecemeal together?
And, I mean, we talked about the transfer portal a little bit. It's not obviously fantastic, but they do have a few good players coming in. Brendan Jacob out of Florida, 4-star safety, 6'2", 170. Dejon Williams coming out of Baltimore, Maryland, staying home at Maryland at 5'10", 195. Could be a really good running back addition for them, or at least a sub, rotational piece.
Yeah.
They've got a few other players. I mean, their recruiting class is still the 54th. So it's not it's not going to be probably what you would say game changers necessarily, but good potential developmental
Mhm.
developmental players. And I think that's right now Mike Locksley. I don't think that even if Maryland has a bad season this year, I don't think his job is actually in jeopardy because
Yeah.
right now there's like we've talked about with some of the upper echelon. I just don't know who they would get that would replace the relationships that Mike Locksley has gotten with some of these surrounding high schools. He does get usually pretty decent talent, and they do a pretty good job at Maryland at recruiting, usually.
Well,
Not
Mike
this year. This
Loxley's
year is
always
kind of a
been
down.
he's always been a great recruiter, and the students have always liked him, even when he was
Mhm.
at Bama.
Yeah. He's a good coach for sure, and I don't foresee. I think Maryland gives him a long leash, so I think that he's okay there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think in the era of the expanded playoff, we mentioned it before, but I think you're gonna see teams give their coaches a little bit more
Right.
leeway.
Yeah.
And no divisions in the Big Ten. It's different. Um, the
Much
SEC is
very
going
much
that
so.
way. A lot of conferences are going that way with no divisions.
Right.
But yeah, I guess for Maryland again, it's you got some like I'm not saying it's the greatest portal class, but they did get O-line help, and that's what they need. And it
Yeah.
sounds like Jalen Husky coming in from Bowling Green, he's going to be one of their starters on defense. They really need that help on the back end. I think he's going to do an all right job there, but he's got to be
Yep.
ready. It's going to come down again to MJ Morris and
Mhm.
Cameron Edge. Could you see a spring, a quarterback battle going into the UConn game? I think you very well could. When you look at the schedule, you have UConn
Right.
first. I think they're going to be a little bit improved, UConn, um, but you've got to get this figured out because then you open up with Michigan State in the Big Ten play. And like
Yep.
you said, you've got to kill it in these first 6 weeks before you play
Yeah,
USC.
5, 6 weeks. Yeah.
You have to do
Yeah,
good the
6
first
weeks.
6
First
weeks.
6 weeks, if you don't walk out of there 6-0, I fully expect that your homecoming game with USC could end in disaster.
Yeah. That like you said, that back end is tough. USC, Oregon, Rutgers, I think is going to be solid. Iowa's going to have a strong defense again, and then Penn State. It's a winnable schedule. I've seen some Maryland fans suggesting they can win 9, and I mean obviously they have more feeling of the inside of the program than we do. But outward looking in, like man, that's tough, especially with the new quarterback that you still don't know who's going to start yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can understand maybe the 7.5, but it's to me that's pushing it a little bit. I could see an 8, but I'm feeling maybe a little bit under personally on the over-under. But what do you guys think? Schedule-wise, finish off with them?
Yep. Yeah, the schedule for them, with all due respect to Maryland, because I think they've built a pretty decent mid-level Big Ten program right now, and I don't mean that any disrespectfully at all, because when they came into the Big Ten, it was not a pretty picture, where Maryland football was at the time. So to get from there to where they're at now, I think it's a very good accomplishment, and I think that they're only going to get better. I mean, last year we were definitely talking about them potentially upsetting Penn State, or in fact, I think I picked them to upset Penn State at the time when they played. And I just don't see it this year. Like, if they had a little bit more stability at the quarterback position, I may be a little I'd be a lot more confident in the season and projecting a little more wins. But the way their situation is currently, I just don't see them even getting to the betting line of 7.5, or 8 wins essentially.
Yeah, so they would need to get 8 to hit the over. So, I mean, I can see a road. I really can, but MJ Morris is going to have to ball out. Blake, what do you think?
It's going to go one of two ways. I think they have to go 6-0 to start the season if they have a chance at hitting 8, because only 2 of those last 6 games do I see as winnable. And even then, like, Rutgers is a winnable game. Iowa, I still think is going to be a tough game. Penn State's going to be tough. USC is going to be very tough. Oregon's going to be very tough. If I was a betting man, I would bet the under, but I could see a path to where they do pull what if they come together? What if they get a good quarterback? It happens every season, and they could have a cohesive unit by midseason, and know each other really well, play really well. And I think they're returning 6 or 7 starters on defense. So I mean, if they get good play out of their defense and they can find a style of offense and they're jiving, I mean, there is a path to 8-9 wins. I just wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, it's again, defense is going to drive this team. They're going to keep them in, I'd say, every single game. Offense, just get your first downs. But it's on MJ Morris and the line. Again, they did lose a couple big ones: Barnum to Michigan, Rico Walker, tight end, and then Coley and then Cooley to NC State. So lost some, but not huge losses. I still have trust in Mike Locksley. I think he's a good coach. So Maryland fans, let us know what you think and maybe why we're wrong, why we should believe more. Because outward looking in, it's tough to go full in on an unproven quarterback. And I say, well, let's go in and move on to Michigan State. What do you guys think? Because they've got a lot of changes.
Yeah, they've got quite a bit.
As well. Oh my gosh, yeah. So 2023 Sparty, this season you want to forget for Michigan State. Obviously, a lot of off the field issues, but on the field, not pretty. They did sneak wins against Nebraska and Indiana, which thank God they did. Otherwise, you're looking at a 2-10 season. But now you can't even really talk about 2023 anymore because it's a totally different team. You've got a brand new coach, new quarterbacks. How are you guys feeling about this coach coming in, Jonathan Smith, and what he can do for Michigan State?
I like Jonathan Smith. I just don't think this year is going to be, nothing to write home about. I'm seeing 4 or 5 wins, maybe. It's just you're coming into a shit show, and the way that the schedule's lining up, I just don't see much better than that for Michigan State. They've lost a lot. They did get a couple of key pieces coming in, especially everybody's looking at Aiden Childs, and he's a big name, and he can create a lot of production for Michigan State. But just with the changes in the Big Ten, I think it's a lot tougher of a schedule than it's been in the past for him. And I just don't think he's going to be able to do much in year one, but I do think it is a step in the right direction for their program. So we'll see.
Yeah, their over under is 5.5. Just so we get that out there. Trevor, what about you? What do you think
Yeah.
about Jonathan Smith?
Well, I mean, for Michigan State, I think that's a great hire. Way considering what the comparison is. I mean, he's a rock star already, being what 10 times the coach their previous coach was. He's he was at Oregon State, where you don't even have half the resources at Oregon State that you would at Michigan State. I think Jonathan Smith is a good actually, I think it's a great hire for Michigan State, and I'm glad they did it. Because I don't think there was much better on the market at that time that would consider Michigan State for a job. There might be some upper echelons, but I just think that he was the best choice to go after, I think, for what Michigan State wants to do. And their transfer class, phenomenal. I mean, it's 12th in the country. They knocked it out of the park there with getting who they needed, and what positions they needed it at. I really like the pickup at offensive line from Illinois. Andrew Dennis, obviously, we talked about that a little bit a couple episodes ago when we covered the Illini. But I mean, Andrew Dennis, I mean, he's walking in as a freshman, and he's 6'5", 290, interior lineman. That'll be a great help to them. They got a few other pieces. Obviously, we know about Aiden Childs. But, I mean, they picked up a few defensive pieces where a few linebackers, cornerbacks, all from big programs: Michigan, LSU, Oregon, North Carolina, the U, Nebraska. Like, they're cherry picking for just about a lot of really good programs with a lot of good developmental programs in there. And with Michigan State, I have a lot of optimism, less confidence in year one, kind of like what Blake, kind of echoing what Blake was saying, is that I think they're building great pieces, and they're definitely going to be formidable, especially getting Aiden Childs the experience and getting him, reps. Even if he's the starter, he's the starter. It is what it is. You ride the young guy. But I think that they definitely have an opportunity to do something really cool. However, they also might have the toughest 4-game stretch in the Big Ten. I'd have to go back and look at all the schedules again to be certain, but that's a really tough 4-game stretch, fellas. Starting with Ohio State and going to Oregon next, Iowa, and then going to Michigan. That's a rough one, boys.
Yeah, it's the middle. Really is tough, but I'll say I see optimism in this first year. Though, again, this is a whole new team, so you can't judge them for what they were. It's you've got to just kind of play it by ear. So I'm not saying they're going to be trash. I know there's a lot of Michigan fans out there that they're going to suck. Yeah, they've lost a shit ton. I'm not going to lie to you. They've lost a shit ton of players. 38 losses. They brought in 24 though. So I mean, you're plugging people back in. You did have some key losses, but yeah, the schedule. I think there's winnable games that could get you to the over, and get you to a bowl game. But a lot of it again relies on who you brought in and depth. Depth is what I'm the most concerned about for Michigan State.
Right.
And like you said, you brought in Childs, Dennis on the line, Wayne Matthews on the defensive side of the ball. He should help. Looking at guys like Dunnigan on the edge, he's trending upwards. So I can see good things, but they also lost guys like Mangum to Michigan, Harmon, Barrow, Berger. You lost depth guys, and also a lot of quality reps and starters. So that's the problem, is depth for me. And I guess, looking at the schedule again, you get Florida Atlantic early, the first game, and then Maryland, again, team we just talked about. They're going to have a strong defense. They've got some pieces on offense, including their tight end that also came over from Oregon State. So you've got problems against Maryland week 2. But then even if you lose that game, you can go correct it against Prairie View. Boston College should be a win, but they've got some things going there. But then, like you said, you get in that stretch, and it's like, God dang. Any momentum you have could just get smoked right there.
Yeah, and I really am only seeing in the recruiting class probably one youngster that might make a significant impact, and that's Nick Marsh, wide receiver out of
Yeah.
River Rouge, Michigan, 6'3", 200 pounds, top 150 player, second in the state, 22nd best wide receiver in the country. I mean, that's usually that kind of caliber of player finds his way on the field. Maybe not as an every down starter, but definitely a rotational wide receiver coming in throughout the game, I would imagine.
Yeah, I agree. Blake, what do you think about the schedule? I mean, I think it's winnable. It's gnarly in the middle, though.
It's a tough schedule. I mean, to be rebuilding a program like he's having to do,
Yeah.
like I said, I really just don't. It's not in his favor. Even some of the smaller tier games is still going to be tough. It's like Colorado last season. You know, they brought in some guys, but you still have to have like a cohesive unit and have them all like bought into the system. And you really just don't know until week 3 or 4, because everybody thought Colorado was going to the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
And then they lost like 8 straight games. So, I mean, you've got to have like that bought in mentality, which he seems to be good at getting players to do because he did it at Oregon State, you know?
Yeah.
But I just think this is a different beast than the Pac-12 was. And I just think it's going to be a lot more difficult to do.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, man. Truly, because you could go off and win your first 2 games, and everybody might hold on, this is it. But then you get into the bigger teams, Ohio State, Oregon, and knocks you down. Iowa, Michigan, Indiana is a totally revamped team as well. We're not going to know what they're like until kickoff. And then Rutgers, and I think you should beat Illinois and Purdue, but Illinois, again, these are tough games, week in and week out. So I can see why it's at 5.5, but they do have pieces on offense. They have help in the middle on the line. So
and their blogs are excited about the new coaching staff. I think I've read a few different articles on the coaching staff where they're really excited about some of the ancillary pieces from outside of Jonathan Smith. Like a big recruiter that they got was safeties coach Blue Adams. He's really a well thought of recruiter in the Midwest and Florida regions, and the big they're excited about the offensive line coach Jim Michalzik, whatever. I think that's how it's pronounced. I apologize, Mr. Jim, if that is incorrect.
Dude, there's a lot of names out there.
He was the orchestrator of the offensive line at Oregon State, who actually was a fairly good offensive line, and so they're really excited about what he was actually a Burroughs Award nominee last season for the best assistant coach in the country, and his offensive line was really, really well. And the other guys, Brian Lindgren, offensive coordinator coming in, they really, really, really like his play calling and what he did at Oregon State as well. And I actually think Oregon State's offense last year, I think I would safely say that would have translated pretty decently to the Big Ten, the way they were kind of running their offense.
Yeah. And I agree. And that's what you see what they did in the portal. They went and got help on the interior. Starting center has come over and joined them. The guy left guard that we talked about in Dennis. So you're seeing help with guys in the back end. You've got good running backs. Lynch Adams came in. Nate Carter had a solid year last year for what he was dealing with, on the surrounding pieces. You got some weapons outside, Foster out wide. He should be in the slot. And then Glover is back. So there's people. And then like you mentioned, Nick Marsh, he had a good spring game. So there's things there. You just hope that Childs can be the main guy and that the offensive line can hold together for him. Because if Childs is it, like everybody's thinking he can be, this can be a dangerous team. And they may not win all the games, but they can sure screw up a season. So
and there's one other point that I want to make abundantly clear to all Spartan fans. There is one thing I'm looking for from the Michigan State Spartans, and that is what's the word I'm looking for here? Consistency. Do the
Yeah.
one thing that everyone for the past before your previous coach thought of Michigan State being consistent, being sound fundamentally, that they aren't blowing their heads off at the beginning of games or anything like that. They're just going. They're not trying to fight another team in the tunnel. They're just trying to play football the best way Michigan State does, and that's with cool heads and executing their plan, their game plan to the letter, because that's the one thing that Michigan State over these past few years, even before COVID and everything, that's what I recognize Michigan State football as a non-Michigan State guy. That's how I've looked at them. They were all there. You could bet no matter where they were, win loss wise, you bet that they are going to follow the game plan and do sound fundamentals, tackling, going, downhill to the ball, everything like that. You automatically expect a little bit of anger from the defense on the Michigan State side. So I'll be looking for those particular attributes to see if Michigan State football is on its way back to that point.
Yeah, and like you said, you get that discipline back, the culture back. I think they're going to be fine moving forward. Defensively, right now, though, and to Blake's point with the schedule, because it is tough. The defense worries me for Michigan State. They've got some solid players, but they lost a lot. I mean, really, you're hoping guys like coming in like Ed Woods from Arizona State. You hope he steps in, but it's. To me, I'm really worried about this defense. So even if your offense is rolling and you can't stop anybody, good luck. And that's where my worry would be. And another reason why I could see it, at the 5.5, maybe you only get 5 wins just because your defense is so bad. Any last thoughts, boys? I got nothing else on Sparty. I do like the momentum they have, the direction they're going. We got to prove it. We got to see it on the field. Blake, anything, Trevor?
No, we're good. I'm good to move forward.
All right, let's roll on then, and we'll hit the University of Michigan.
Our last team in the Big Ten.
Last team in the Big Ten, boys, and then we're rolling on to the Big 12 next. Obviously, 2023 had some scandalous stuff going on, but then it all evened out, and they went and got the national championship. Which is just funny after everything going on that they win it. Obviously, 2023, again, a different season than what 2024 is. You can project some things because there's continuity from the coaching staff, though they did lose a lot of defensive coaches. You promoted a lot from within as well. Obviously, Sharon Moore, up and coming offensive coordinator, stepped in a lot last year when Harbaugh was out. Well, now he's the main guy. And they only returned 36% of their production from a team that had the 67th rated offense overall and the first ranked defense. So really, you're looking at the coordinators, the changing pieces of the coaching staff, and then the portal too. We'll talk about more in a minute. Trevor, Blake, what do you think about Sharon Moore being hired, and then maybe what this direction is for Michigan? Because I know 36% returning, a lot of people look at that, but I don't think it's as bleak as what others may suggest.
I don't think it's a big deal either. I think systematically, you're not going to see a huge drop off from what was the Michigan Wolverines last year. There were the two guys up front, Mason Graham, and I don't remember the other guy's name. I'm sure y'all know who it is. Yes. Defensively, I'm not worried about Michigan really, except maybe on the back end secondary, but I'm really not worried there. A lot of Michigan fans, from what I've seen, is worried about the recruiting, how that seems to be going. But I mean, with the portal now, there's not so much emphasis that has to be necessarily put into recruiting. I mean, it's still important, obviously, but being Michigan, you can find somebody if you need them and plug them and play them. I mean, big D1 schools like that are going to be able to pull that off more so than like Colorado as the example. They're always going to be the example of why things don't work, Colorado. But systematically, though, offensively, Donovan Edwards is going to be a huge part of the offense. He's going to carry the load. And you really which y'all got to see what he could do all season, but most of the United States didn't see what he could do until the postseason, especially the Washington game. I mean, he just had a field day. But I see Michigan getting back up there 10, 11 wins. That's what I see. I don't think there's going to be a big drop off from Harbaugh leaving. The names that I've read of Sharon Moore replacing the coordinators with, I mean, I like what he's put together as far as a staff.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the players as y'all do, but just from what I've read, I think you've still got a solid team in Michigan, and the continuity, he ran the program basically for 3-4 weeks while Harbaugh was out. I mean, a lot of the Michigan guys wanted him to be named. I mean, there was really no other name to hire. He was the guy. So I really I see a solid Michigan team this year.
Trevor, what do you think staff-wise? I know you got all that information.
Yeah, so man, like with the Michigan team, it's a tough one for me because I am literally trying to make myself not optimistic right now. Because while everyone seems to think and wants to portray that Michigan's going to have this massive fall off because they don't have a quarterback yet or anything like that. By the way, I do not think it'll be Orgy starting in week 1, but that's beside the point.
We'll talk about that here shortly.
I'll circle back to that in a second. But no, everybody's talking about this massive fall off, and I'm just like, does no one like pay attention to the season and how everything kind of progressed last season? Like you kept doubting them, you keep pushing, and before you know it, the Wolverines are going to take your freaking arm off, and this is kind of the way it's going to be. And that's not me speaking as a fan. It's just like I was observing the media and all these people telling them that they shouldn't be able to do it, that they can't do it, and then they just keep it on, and just. I mean, not to be cliche, but bulletin board material for days.
Sure.
And there was a quote that I really like the hire for the coordinator spots. Wink Martindale actually is still in contact with Jesse Minter, which might put some Michigan fans at ease, is that they have communicated about the lingo, the language, and all that other stuff like that. So it's not as big of a transition. And yes, I am one of those Michigan guys that prays to God. This is not a Don Brown reincarnate, but everything that we are reading, it doesn't appear to be that way. He does like to be more aggressive. He is out of the 3 coaches we've had, Minter, McDonald, and now Martindale, he is by far the more aggressive of the 3.
Yeah.
So with that regards, I understand the hesitancy or the not necessarily fear, but just like uncertainty on how the defense is going to perform.
Sure.
And leaving the corners on an island with, well, let's just be honest, a very, very talented schedule coming up as far as wideouts go.
Yeah.
So I think that's why people are so nervous, is like, don't leave our corners on an island with some of these phenom wide receivers that are in the Big Ten now, not only coming from USC and USC and Oregon, but also Ohio State has a monster freshman that he's just a freak. He's a freak, and I don't mean that in a bad way. That is the most positive thing I could possibly say about him right now, because he is absolutely amazing and hard not to watch.
Yeah,
but. Look, speaking of the schedule, though, the Texas game coming right, Fresno State right off the gate. First of all, that would be one of my teams that could be a sleeper for, the group of 5 teams. Honestly, they are very good. That is not just a walkthrough game. Texas, obviously, we all know what kind of game that's going to be, and unfortunately, it'll be at noon. But
depends on who you are. I think that honestly helps Michigan.
Oh no, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if you go by at least
I know it might be silly, but
at least hit some. If you're superstitious, that's true. That's true. Michigan doesn't have the best record underneath the lights. However, last year they definitely shot that little thing down. Underneath the lights at Michigan Stadium, I think their record's not so great. But
not even necessarily that. I don't, because I don't know the record on their lights. I just because I mean, anytime Michigan plays on their lights, it's a freaking huge game. It's beautiful. I love it. I mean, I love it. But it's more. It just kind of. I feel like these big noon kickoffs kind of take a little bit away from the craziness and the hype, like what you see.
Right.
You know, like Bama LSU at night. I mean, everybody that game is just nuts. I'm not saying this. It's going to be like Texas is coming in and unprepared, but it feels a little different when it's at noon to me, and maybe that's just me. Sorry, Trevor, go on.
No, you're good. And yeah, you're right. I mean, don't get me wrong. Regardless of when they play, the Texas game is. Well, I've heard people say it will be a defining moment for the entire college football world as far as like which one is going to. Because let's just face it, essentially, depending where Michigan's starting at in the rankings, if they beat the Texas Longhorns at that point in time,
yeah,
I would imagine that they would just flip flop positions at that point, right out the gate or close to it. Maybe Texas wouldn't drop that far, but I'm just saying Michigan would definitely be back up into the conversation immediately.
Yeah.
So I would say that Michigan has to win that game. They have to win. I mean, game by game, they just have to win it. And then, they're lucky enough to have Texas and USC at the beginning of the season in Ann Arbor. That at least will help them. And then they got to go out to Washington for the Natty rematch. And that one will be interesting for me because it's not only just at Washington. The following week, they are at Illinois. I mean, I know that's not much of a travel, but out to Washington, then back out again. Doesn't leave for a lot of prep time. Let's see here.
You got Oregon still, Ohio State, obviously. It's a tough schedule. It's one of the tougher ones out there.
It's one of the tougher ones. I would venture to say that outside of Purdue, they probably have one of the tougher ones. But that's
simply because you're playing what 3 of the top 4 teams in college football.
Yeah.
So
I
do want
3
to
of the
point
top
out
ones, and then if you're asking me, I think USC has the capability of being a top 10 team this year as well. But I mean, I think they have the capabilities. It's just they have a lot of unknowns as well. So, but I think USC is going to be one of those dangerous teams this year.
Blake, what were you saying?
I just wanted to point out something real quick. You was talking about people being concerned about the quarterback at Michigan. I just don't see that being a big issue with the way the offenses ran. I don't think a lot is asked out of the quarterback if the run game is as successful as it was last year.
That's really where the big questions really come in. It's not just about the quarterback. It's mostly about how does this offensive line gel together, because it is essentially an entire new group.
Yeah.
So, well, let's talk about the team then, because I mean, we can revisit the schedule in a minute. I mean, obviously we're giving a brief rundown, but again, they've changed the staff. A lot of it's within. Kirk Campbell's offensive coordinator now. He was a quarterback's coach, so there's continuity, there's trust there. And then, like you said, Wink being the founder of this style of Ravens defense, that gives some hope. And just I think he's just there to be the main guy. He's not really recruiting, even though he's been active on Twitter. You're letting the other defensive staff do that. So he's focused on this defense. Now, you did lose players in the portal. Keon Sabb going to Alabama, that's the biggest loss, especially once Rod Moore got injured. And it just shitty timing for Michigan. He transfers, and then like 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, Rod Moore, all-star defensive back, one of the best in the nation, tears his ACL. He's out for the season. But some hope on the back end of that is Quentin Johnson coming back. He declared for the draft. He never got a agent, and then he decided he's like, you know what, I'm going to come back. I'm gonna sit back in, and he was vital in a lot of spots. He's a seasoned veteran. That's going to help a lot on the back end.
Absolutely.
Losing Beasley sucks. He's a young linebacker. highly rated guy, and then DJ Waller, another back end guy. You're like, okay, our depth's starting to look really bad. I'm freaking worried now. But then towards the middle of May, they start loading up on the portal. They went out and got a lot of guys in the defense, and this is where you needed the help at. Amir Hall, which was a big name in the FCS role at Albany, he played really well. Ricky Johnson's coming over to help shore up the back end. Wesley Walker from Louisville. But then you also get help on the offense where we lost a lot of wide receivers, depth guys. But you bring back a Marion Walker who went to Ole Miss at the first transfer portal period, and then he came back. He was like, I need to be playing wide receiver because they had him at defensive back. So he's like, I need to be a wide receiver. They brought him back, and that's what he's going to do. And, of course, Jaden Mangum from Michigan State. So you get help. You shore up the areas on defense, and I think this defense, again, is going to be a top 15, top 10 defense. So I'm not worried about that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely – I like what you said there. Marion Walker's great. I really do like the pickup for CJ Charleston. I know he's out of Youngstown State, but he looks like a decent-sized wide receiver. Yeah. And to go from no stars to 3 stars says something about your abilities, even at Youngstown State. So I think that would be a good pickup as well. Just to kind of shift focus just a little bit about the recruiting class being the top 20 recruiting class. We all know about Jaden Davis. That's been well talked about. But there's a few players here, most of them top 300 players, not the ones that I'm referring to, at least. You know, you talked about, I think, didn't you mention Jeremiah Beasley? Yeah. Linebacker? Yeah, you mentioned him. Yeah, those are all great pickups. But my favorite pickup, honestly, is Andrew Sprague. The offensive tackle, 6'7". He's already 286. Man-child again. Like, oh my gosh, he's a top, I guess you could say top 100 player, 3rd best in the state of Missouri, 6th best offensive tackle in the country. That is a big win for Michigan. They need those caliber of offensive linemen to do what they want to do. They did pick up one other offensive lineman out of Ohio. Always nice to grab a few from there. He was 6'5", 290. Looks to be a very good addition as well. You just don't know how some of these guys are going to develop, but I mean, there's some good ones, and there's a couple other top 200 players. We have 2 edge rushers in this year's class, both 6'6", Brendan, and both 200. One's 230 pounds, one's 225, and they look to be like could be difference makers as they put on a little weight. One is Lagarde Adekope, and Devin Baxter, which is both coming out of Maryland, ironically enough.
Yeah, and well, Michigan's recruiting has always been kind of in that 10 to like 20 range. Like it's not the greatest, but it's good enough to get the pieces that you need. Culture fits, and that's what Harbaugh did. And Sharon Morris appears to be doing the same thing. I know there's a lot of flaming about right now you're coming off national championship. You only have 5 recruits. Well, you just got another recruit like 2 days ago, so that helps. And a 4-star. It looks like you're going to get probably a top 100 safety here soon. That was probably going to commit to Penn State. So there's momentum. It's just Michigan's different. They're not paying people out front. They can offer NIL deals, but they're not doing it like they're gonna. Now they'll pay transfer portal guys. I'm not saying that.
You're right. With Jim Harbaugh, it definitely was not. You weren't going to get paid until you proved yourself.
Yes.
I know Sharon Moore is petitioning and was, I know for a little while there, was trying to change the way they did business with the NIL altogether.
Yeah, and that's the hope is hopefully there's more. Obviously, you don't want to kill your culture, but you also need to go get highly talented guys, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and like you mentioned the recruiting class. I mean, with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, I mean, you guys can attest to this, is that you always want quality over quantity. You can, I mean, it feels like that's the way they're going about their business. Is like, I'm going to get the players I want, the right players, the right mentality, as opposed to get a bunch of 5 stars or whatever. Because let's face it, if Michigan wanted to, they could really go after them if they wanted to. It's just a matter of they'd rather develop which I found it funny that one of the recruits that committed to a different school said that Michigan isn't known for developing. In fact, that's all they're known for doing, as a matter of fact. But
yeah, I don't know.
I think it was a quarterback. It was a quarterback. Well, what quarterbacks? I was like, come on, man. Like, really? Like, I don't understand that. But whatever helps him sleep at night for going to LSU.
Yeah, that's 5-star in-state quarterback Underwood. He went down to LSU, and there's reasons why people think that happened. Either way, let's get back to 2024 and the season and what we're seeing from this team. Obviously, some of these recruits, we got a lot of good ones. I don't know if they're going to start because they're deep, especially on defense. And that's one of those things we talk about, quality over quantity. Not a huge portal class, but we got, again, guys that are going to plug and play, like Barnum, Prebe on the line. And that Prebe is probably going to be the biggest pieces to shore up the offensive line. We lost 5 starters, but you got a lot of guys last year that got tons of reps. And that's one of the perks of having a light schedule last season. Everybody got reps. I mean, everybody was getting in-game reps, live action, getting a feel for how things play in real time. So that's a huge plus for the staff. I know only 36% production return, but you're looking at guys that have all played snaps, plenty as well, in multiple games. So the offensive line has talented guys. Sharon Moore has shown that he can develop a line, and so has Newsom, who's the new line coach. And then you're bringing in, like I said, at linebacker, Barnum plugs a hole that you lose from Junior Colson. And then really, so I'm not concerned about the defense at all. Offensively, that's where my concern is. Not necessarily on the offensive line, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's a quarterback. And obviously the biggest thing for Michigan this year, like Blake mentioned, you've got Donovan Edwards in the back. You got Khalil Mullings in the backfield. That's a dangerous backfield. They're going to hammer
Jordan
you.
Marshall, the new recruit running back that they're very, very high on.
Cole Cabana. You got a lot of guys back there.
There's a bunch of them.
And so I think the running back room is very deep. People may not know it, but it is. You look at the wide receivers. You saw talent in the Alabama game come out with Tyler Morris, Samaj Morgan. He's shown potential. He just needs to fix those hands just a little bit. He had some drops, but he's obviously a talented, fast kid. So you want to see him. And then obviously Amarion Walker coming in too helps out a lot. It's coming down to Alex Orji. It's coming down to Davis Warren. Tuttle. I mean, there's a quarterback battle there. Jim Harbaugh mentioned and obviously trusted Alex Orji. He mentioned Orji as a unpolished Jalen Milroe, is what he said before the Alabama game last year.
Yeah, that suggests that Milroe is considered polished, but I digress.
Hey, look, I know Milroe's had issues in the passing game, and Blake can talk about that too, but he's still a dangerous quarterback. He can screw a team real quick. So you've seen what Milroe can do on the ground. They had trust in him to pass the ball in the biggest game, of the year. It didn't happen. The play didn't develop right, but still you have trust in him. So that shows me something. But when I watched the spring game, I was concerned about the accuracy because there's a couple that soared. And I was like, oh God, that's
Davis Warren gave a lot of people something to talk about because he performed very well.
He did. So there's a battle going on in Ann Arbor. And obviously it's spring bowl. Orji's putting in work in the offseason. I've seen videos of him, with his head coach or with the his quarterback's coach, all like off season. They all pay for their own quarterback coaches offline because you can't work with your coaches, in actual practicing. But I think there's reason to have hope for Orji, but I just need to see it. And right now I'm concerned personally.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when push comes to shove, I prefer accuracy over athleticism.
Yeah.
So with that being said, if like JJ kind of looked like crap his first year when he came in for McNamara, I would not have had any problem with McNamara just coming right back in. And I'd prefer consistency over athleticism. I think Orji is phenomenal. He is an amazing athlete, hands down. He's one of the more impressive athletes I've seen in a while, and at quarterback at least. And I think there's a very real potential, and I know the offensive coordinator has mentioned this before, that they could go into the season as a 2-quarterback system where Davis Warren or Alex Orji starts and they rotate in and out. I really hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
because it never usually ends well. But in this particular case, I think it's a possibility for sure.
and Blake, I know you mentioned it too. This offense, you don't really have to be, you don't have to be a guy that's going to go out and throw for 400 yards. But you need to be accurate. You need to be a gainer, and that's what JJ was last year.
Third and short. I need third and medium. Third and mediums. If you are a quarterback that consistently converts third and mediums, I truly believe that you would be the starter at Michigan.
Yeah, and that's all they need, Orgy or whoever's starting to be. But I do worry about that. So when I know a lot of people probably, hey, don't worry about it. It's spring ball. I know, but that's my concern as a Michigan fan. I know there's a lot of hope out there, and I see it. This is a very strong team, like Blake said, but I could see an 8-4 season. I really can.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very possible because one, Texas is going to be a monster right out the gate.
Yeah.
And Michigan's breaking in a new quarterback. Texas most definitely is not. In fact, they have probably one or two, whichever one you want to say, the number 1 or the number 2 best quarterback in the country coming in. And SC has a very highly touted young quarterback who is quite athletic and seems to be pretty accurate. So I think, guys, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think not to mention with Michigan, but I think by the end of the season, they will be saying that Big Ten has the deepest quarterbacks, the most elite quarterbacks in the country by the end of the season. I feel like
interesting.
Is what I really truly feel that they would that's going to end up being the case. That's just my prediction for that.
That would be something, truly.
Yeah,
but it's possible. But
and the only reason I say that is because there's so many unknowns with the quarterbacks, and even with Ohio State, I think with Michigan State, with Oregon. I know Oregon, we think we know what we're getting with their quarterback, but you just don't know because he's breaking into a new system. Washington's breaking in a new quarterback and a new offense for the most part. And USC's got a youngster that we just don't know as well. So I think there's a big potential for that to become a thing.
I guess we'll see when we get there. There's good quarterbacks, they said, across the league. So it's going to be, either way, it's going to be tough for Michigan in this 2024 schedule. Guys, final predictions, I guess, on this team. They're over-unders 9.5. Vegas likes them. But it's, I think it's tough. I can see hitting 9 and 3. But you'd really want to win one of those big ones as Michigan to be happy. I think you want 9 and 3, 10 and 2, and you'd be happy.
When I look at Michigan's schedule, I see the problems being Texas, Washington only because it's on the road, Oregon, USC, and Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And out of those 5 teams, could they lose all 5 of them? Sure. But I see them winning at least 3 of them. I think they'll beat Washington. I think they'll beat Oregon. And when it comes down to it, the toughest ones, I think, are the Texas and the Ohio State game. And I see them winning at least one of those because I for one, just don't think Ohio State is going to be as good as everyone thinks they're going to be. That's just the vibe I'm getting from them.
What was the comparison? I saw a comparison today that made me laugh. They said today's Ohio State reminds me of 06's Georgia with what's his face? Help me out with the coach's name. That was back then.
Oh, man.
Mark Richt and that talented, I think it was 06 or 08, where he had Matt Stafford and all those guys on his team and everything like that. And they were talking the same way about Ohio State or about Georgia at the time. They're loaded. They're guaranteed to win the championship and all that stuff like that. And they made that comparison. I was like, that's a little unfair, but okay.
I just feel like there's too much stock going into Will Howard that he's just going to come in and just take the reins and lead them to a championship. And he may do it, but to me, it's just unproven. And I just don't see it happening that way. I wouldn't be shocked if, like we talked about off camera, Penn State, James Franklin's in a must-win scenario. Like he has to make something happen this year. Will he? Probably not, because he's the king of 10 wins. And then Oregon, you don't know what you're going to get with Dylan Gabriel. I mean, so there's just a lot of up in the air right now in the Big Ten. And I feel like Michigan, out of those teams, has the most, like most simplistic scheme on their team and their offense for people to be able to settle in, learn the system, and go with it, versus Oregon, a high-flying offense, Ohio State, a high-flying offense. That's hard to bring a bunch of new guys in and learn that system like that. So that's why I was leaning Michigan. I'm in no way fangirling, and y'all know that.
Yeah,
so,
we don't really.
Yeah,
I'm honestly surprised.
We're really big Michigan fans, but at the end of the day, we're looking at this through an outside point of view lens of like, if I was looking at this team compared to last year, what am I looking at? And that's the way I approach it. Because, I mean, the show doesn't do me any good by like, oh, they're going to be awesome. They're going to beat everybody. Undefeated season again. No,
I mean, if Dylan Gabriel comes in and clutches, I mean, Oregon could be just like last year.
They're a monster, especially if that offense starts clicking. 100%.
But
they're
aside
dangerous.
from that, everything's a toss-up in the Big Ten to me. I think there's 3 or 4 teams, and it could go any direction on those 4.
Yeah, I mean, the tiebreakers are going to be brutal this year, I feel like, in my opinion.
A lot of crazy tiebreakers and fighting for seeding. Honestly, even if Michigan goes 10-2, 9-3, you've got some good wins in there. You could see them at the very 10-2 for sure. I feel like they're a playoff team. 9-3, you're on the outside looking in, most likely. But the whole college football year, there's a lot of crazy games, schedules. Who knows what the hell is happening? So we'll see what happens when we get down to that point. For me, again, Michigan, offensive line gelling and quarterback play, that's going to dictate your season. But defense I think it's going to pick up right where it left off. You got a lot of studs, especially on the edge and the D line, linebacker play, and then of course Will Johnson, Quentin Johnson back there, and then you've got some other seasoned guys that have been around, Makari Page, to help out. So I think it's going to be a good year. How good, I don't know, but I've tempered my expectations personally just because I was not very impressed with the quarterback play in the spring game. But again, I know it's a spring game and things can change going into fall. There's a lot of time to work on shit. And that's my hope as a Michigan fan, things get settled out. Well, guys, anything else before we close out tonight?
Nope.
All right. Well, hey, we appreciate you. Obviously, the Big Ten is done. We're going to move on to the Big 12. Might have a show this weekend. We'll see. I expect we will probably Saturday. But again, we appreciate everything you guys do for us, listening, sharing. Make sure you like, subscribe, somewhere down there, follow, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you around for the Big 12 previews. And what a crazy conference that's going to be. That'll be a fun one to talk about. And predictions are going to be nuts. I don't know how anybody's going to predict the Big 12. Either way, we appreciate you. I hope you guys have a great night. We'll see you around.
Later.